Well, hello everybody. I haven't been around much lately because I'm busy doing other things. But on Beyond Room 313 tonight, I have an old friend, Maria Wheatley, who's here to talk about her new book on Stonehenge and also a couple of events both Maria and I will be doing at the in summer and in the autumn, which we'll talk about as well. So, Maria, it's great to see you again. I hope everything you're unbelievably busy. You seem to be everywhere these days. How are you doing? And what are you up to?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm promoting my latest book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, and I'm going to various different places, hosting workshops from ancient America to Egypt. And later in the year, I'll be in a retreat in Mexico as well. So lots of amazing things that I'm looking forward to.
Have you been to Mexico before?
No, this will be my first trip, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, you really like it. Mexican people are really nice. They're lots of fun. It's kind of like a good vibe there. But you've got this book out, The Secret History of Stonehenge. It's a very intriguing title. I know you have a long relationship with that remarkable place. And in fact, we were even there many years ago one morning, I remember, when the sun was rising, and that was a magical experience. I remember that quite well. But what is the secret history?
Well, the secret history is I looked into some very old reports predating William Stukeley, for example, who was writing about Stonehenge from 1725 onwards, who said that Stonehenge looks a particular way. And when I was reading the older reports, they said, for example, there was two altar stones. The royal family stole one, and they even told you where they took it. Then there was a buried trilithon that didn't fit the model that William Stukeley said, and that was partially buried in the 1930s. So what I've done is I've looked at all of the stone placements and done a new view of Stonehenge and put the stones back, and also looked at, Thomas, you might like this regarding henges. For listeners that don't know what a henge is, it's the bank that surrounds a sacred site, quite often a stone circle or a causewayed enclosure, for example. And I noticed that in my legacy archive of master dowsers, I came across the curator of Stonehenge, who was the guardian there as well, from the 1930s to the 1960s. He was very widely respected. He was at a dig with Richard Atkinson in the 1950s, and Richard Atkinson told the people of England, or told the world, that the Henge Bank was just chalk rubble. And Tom Gorey said, no, it wasn't. That was the name of the curator. He said it was really smoothed out, almost carved out of the solid chalk bedrock, a bit like a pudding bowl, so that the bank comes up and the original floor of Stonehenge was white. Look into reports by Mike Parker Pearson of University College London. He did an excavation of a very similar site in Dorset and found carvings on the Henge Bank. Those carvings were concentric concentric circles rather, spirals and chevron patterns, all of which are earth energy patterns. And I propose that those carvings were also at Stonehenge, but painted in ochre, red ochre, yellow ochre, and golden ochre, because I find ochre everywhere in the Stonehenge environs.
Yeah, I think a lot of megaliths and the standing stones were painted everywhere. I think that's a myth that they were always just stones. Now,
Mm.
this is fascinating. I have Atkinson's book. I have the original edition. It's a great read and everything, and the photos and everything are really interesting. But you're saying that the henge was basically a white chalk circle that went around Stonehenge.
Yes, it was roughly speaking, according to the latest documentation, it could have been as high as 6 to 7 feet, possibly even higher. So when you approach Stonehenge, you wouldn't have seen it. You'd have only seen the greater trilithons, lintel, peeking over the tall bank.
And when do you think the embankment was taken down?
That was ploughed out from about, we know it was really low in 1575 through some old depictions of Stonehenge. So it was starting to go down then.
Okay, so this, see, I always had a problem with Stukely's stuff as well. A lot of his drawings and topographical maps of they're not right. Like the Avebury one doesn't seem right at all to me. It seems almost like a fantasy of what
It
Avebury
is.
see. Yeah, it's nothing, and yeah, it still appears in books today as how it looked when Stukely had surveyed it.
Exactly. When it comes to Avebury, Thomas, because William Stukely, he was reviving Druidry at the time. He was also a Mason and a Reverend. He wanted that to be a serpent temple. And so he omitted the other two entrances, which today archaeologists believe were also megalithic. So that didn't fit his model. When it comes to the sanctuary with the Avebury map, he made it into an oval shape looking like a serpent's head, but it's a perfect concentric stone circle. So that's a bit of a nonsense as well.
Yeah, and he was, he was very much, the church type guy that wanted everything to fit in with the Bible. So there was this whole thing. He was obsessed with that Druids had done it as well, which we know was thousands and thousands of years before the Druids. But okay, so Stonehenge looked quite different in the 1500s, and you found these pre-Stukely documents. This is fascinating stuff because I didn't know about this. What this not only was this circle around it, but it also had a different trilithons. You're saying?
It could have had a sixth trilithon. When John Aubrey was there, he predates William Stukely, for example. So John Aubrey was there roughly about 1666. He wasn't sure how many trilithons were there. He drew a map and he didn't know if there were 6 or 7. So he's questioning that. When it came to Indigo Jones, the royal architect of James I, where they were the first to dig in the centre of Stonehenge. There was James I, his lover, George Villiers. He was married to Queen Anne of Denmark, but he had his dashingly handsome Duke next to him, and they were digging along the royal architect at the centre of Stonehenge. They claimed that there was a second altar stone, and that altar stone was the same height as the first altar stone that still is there today. They described it. Then what George Villiers wanted, his mother was an occultist, and this is the time when James I was whipping up a frenzy about the Berwick witches and all sorts of manner of witchcraft claims. And so he was doing that. At the same time, George Villiers' mother was doing these very strange blood rituals for James I. And George Villiers wanted to buy the Greater Trilithon that was then leaning, and it's shown in all of the pictures, leaning up until 1901 when Colonel Hawley erected it straighter. He wanted to buy that. The landowner thankfully said, no, you're not having the stones. So he then said, we'll take the second altar stone. And they even told us where they took it. We carted it away to St. James's Palace in London. Prior to Buckingham Palace, St. James's Palace was the royal residence. So they stole the stone and they told you where they took it. It was right up until the 1930s that archaeologists were literally still tapping on the royal residence door and saying, what about the second altar stone? Till then, the royal door closed very firmly in the archaeologist's face, and nobody's asked since, till me. And I've written a letter, email to St. James's Palace, basically asking for the stone back.
And where in the palace is it? Do you know?
No, nobody knows. The trail went cold from as soon as Inigo Jones, who was an architect, he built Banqueting Hall in London. He was the royal architect at that time. So they could have taken it to St. James's Palace, as indeed they said, which was recorded much later by John Aubrey. The vicar told John Aubrey it also got stolen. But then he was an architect, it could have gone somewhere else. We simply don't know. But what we do know is if you look to these early reports, they make a lot of different suggestions about Stonehenge that were spoon-fed by English heritage here today.
That King James was some trip, wasn't he? This guy, I often had the feeling that he was an occultist. Now, this doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, he wrote Demonology, and he personally attended the torturing of the Berwick witches, whom he blamed for causing a storm when he was coming back from Denmark. And then at the end of his life, he said something like, "Oh well, like all Pendle witches, Berwick witches, they were probably all innocent, but after they'd all been like tried with his laws and just because they were poor, he did it. Meanwhile, it's just like today, the ones at the very top are playing games that we're not allowed to play. That doesn't surprise me
Yeah.
one bit.
Yeah, exactly. And the George Villiers' mother, who was an occultist, they performed blood rituals on James I. That's very well documented by a historian called Tracy Borman, who's written a very classic book all about the witch trials of that time and looked very deeply into numerous trials there. And a big question mark always hangs over George Villiers and that family as being a major occultist to James I. And indefinitely, what I think was they wanted the power of Stonehenge because at that time, from the 12th century onwards, since Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote the History of the Kings of Britain, he stated in that no stone at Stonehenge doth not have healing power. So they were using it as a healing sanctuary. And I think the King James I, his tongue was too big for his mouth. When he used to drink his beer, he used to slobber everywhere. His legs were too thin for his body, and so he was always falling over. He was quite a very, very strange character. And even his paintings, which aren't particularly attractive, they said they really made him look even more attractive. So we think that he was a very strange character. But in the secret history of Stonehenge as well, going back to the creator's notes that I inherited, it's quite remarkable because right up until the 1950s, one of the trilathons was very unusual. And a trilathon, for the listeners that will go, what's a trilathon at Stonehenge? It's the two stones with the one on top that are inside of the lintled stone circle, of which there was about 30. And it's the first trilathon as you walk in through the entrance, and it'll be on your left-hand side. It's called Trilathon 51 and 52 for the geeks like me out there. And the curator noticed that even in a drought, even in times of high winds, that stone had a hole in it, Thomas, that was 2 feet deep that you could put your arm inside like that. It was very well documented, and it used to apparently fill up with water. They didn't know where the water came from, but it was always fresh, it was always pure. They looked to water diviners to try and solve the mystery. You cannot have underground water just filling up a hole. You can even see where the water flowed over and has caused water erosion on the actual stone. I photographed that and have documented it. So people used to queue there. It was rumoured all around Amesbury, all around the local area, that if you had eczema, if you had, wounds, if you had ailments, go to that stone, put the water on, and it will heal you. So what did the then Ministry of Works do? There was no English Heritage, no National Trust. There was a government body called the Ministry of Works that looked after our ancient sites, well, that's debatable, controlled our ancient sites. And they decided that they didn't like the idea of people queuing up for healing. So they plugged it up with concrete and plastic. And to this day, you can see where they plugged it up.
It's just incomprehensible. We see these. I mean, you and I have been looking at these places for years, and we always find these anomalies. And why did they move the stone here? Why did they do that there? And I only ever come back to the thing they deliberately damaged or messed with these megalithic sites in order to destroy whatever was inherent in them. That's how I always feel about it, because they were of some benefit to the ordinary people.
Absolutely, and it got written out of the guidebooks, and this comes verbatim from the curator of more than 30 years that was so widely respected. He was invited to all of the digs that ever took place, and he literally managed Stonehenge for all of that time, and things got written out of the early books. It really did. There's Stonehenge is really activated in this year because we're now in the year of the high moon, the moon's most northerly moonrise and the moon's most southerly moonrise, for example. And the other thing I noticed in the secret history, which cover, I mean, it's 400 pages, so you know it covers subjects like energizing. Seeds, I took John Burke's work to the next level about energizing seeds and where to plant. I found all the shamans of Stonehenge, the shield maidens. But when we look at the moon, for example, and how it relates to Stonehenge, then we're at the time when the moon is at its most northerly. And the station stones, they're 4 stones outside of Stonehenge, and they form a rectangular shape. And that rectangular shape, if you're at station stone number 91 and you're looking at station stone number 94, that aligns to the moon's most northerly moon set. And then the other way around, from 93 to 92 station stone, then you are looking to the moon's most southerly moonrise. Put a line down the middle of that rectangle, and you've got 2 Pythagorean triangles 2000 years before Pythagoras, and they're absolutely exact. But why are the station stones placed on top of a mound? Just outside of Stonehenge, you have a huge mound, and originally it had the station stone on the top. But again, originally that was done in the Bronze Age, when I believe there was much, much taller people than the elongated skulled people that I have photographed in that book. I photographed numerous elongated skulls now, and I think they were much shorter than the Bronze Age people, and they created the first and second phase of Stonehenge. But here's the thing. It was discovered about 15 years ago that originally that wasn't a mound. It was a timber structure with the station stone on the inside of that structure. And same in the north and the south. They were timber structures. I think they may have been healing centers, oracle centers, places for ceremony, places for drumming. So these buildings then got destroyed in around 2300 BC, and they were smothered with a mound, and then the stone was uprooted from its original position and placed on top. And Colonel Hawley, in the very first excavation of a station stone, noticed that all of the floors of these structures were yellow plaster, very smooth yellow plaster with a silver stone therein, which could be symbolism of the sun and of the moon. So I think these were literally structures within inside of Stonehenge. And then there was a kind of takeover at Stonehenge by these very, very tall people that seemed to want to eradicate the elongated skull people. And the ADNA, ancient DNA evidence from Professor Ian Barnes, states but by 2480 BC, all of the ancient Britons, which had elongated skulls, there was 2 types of elongated skulls, their DNA had been eradicated and the European DNA took over. But he says a very intriguing fact: for 500 years, when the Beaker culture, or the tall people that some people proclaim are giants, I don't think they were that tall, but they're tall nonetheless, states that they didn't mix for 500 years. These 2 cultures were separate and not intermarrying. Then Professor Barnes says there was a tipping point and they began to intermarry and integrate as 2 cultures becoming one.
So this is in the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
So that would be the time with what they call the Indo-European migration, where Proto-Europeans were taken over, destroyed, whatever, or interbred with the Indo-Europeans. So it ties in perfectly with that story anyway. Now,
yes,
I can't get over this stone that's been stolen and taken by the royals. This is really bugging me now, because it reminds me, have you ever seen the John Carpenter film Season of the Witch? It has a story where
I like John Carpenter, yeah.
Where this guy, Conal Cochrane, steals a megalith and uses it for power over people for a giant ritual. And it's like, that was written by Nigel Neal. You wonder if he knew about the Stonehenge thing as well at St. James's Palace. That to me, is amazing. That's amazing, an amazing part of the story.
It is, and the fact that they were the first documented people to dig there, that's very, very important because it was pristine then. It really was. So they had a lot of weight there. They were staying at Wilcott House, which isn't that far away, and they were riding in daily. They were going to Stonehenge day after day after day and ignoring the London scene, which is quite strange for that era. And the other thing about the change, if we imagine that you've got this incredible structures inside of Stonehenge, it's in a wall of chalk, which gives fantastic acoustic properties that has been widely documented. And you had two concentric circles of bluestones. That's the original Stonehenge. I've got a fantastic email from Professor Mike Parker Pearson when I said to him, "Do you agree with this model for the Stonehenge that we're all familiar with, or are you going to go with English heritage, saying that there was a single stone circle with an inner oval that later became a horseshoe of blue stones right on the inside?" And I've got it in writing. No, I agree with yours. That's exactly what I think. The Bronze Age people came along, Thomas, and because they couldn't uproot the trilithons, they couldn't uproot the giant 16 tons worth of sarcens that made the lintel ring. They could move one of those circles, and that's exactly what they did. They retinkered Stonehenge to make it theirs, to make it a new design. And that's when it's all been dated now. Parker Pearson and many others besides have dated it. So we do know that it was that culture. They also toppled two stones. The two stones, number 8 and 9, the evidence that has been looked at, they were toppled from the inside out as if to make a new entrance into Stonehenge. Again, trying to adopt that monument to make it their own. So the changes that happened were really detrimental to its pristine first phase.
So English Heritage are basically selling a load of nonsense uh,
Yeah,
to all the millions of people
absolutely.
every year.
Absolutely. And what I've done all the documented evidence to this. You could back anything I say up. All of the skulls that I have photographed, I've had a lot of the top people at Oxford commenting on how accurate that is, because when I present something, I say this is what they would have looked like. They also did piercings as well. So when a lot of jet was found by the burials of the very early Bronze Age people and the late Neolithic, they thought they were like little buttons like this, and they were of jet. But when they were put under a microscope relatively recently, they realized that they had soft flesh in them. They were spacers, the stretchers that young people wear now in their ears. That's what the people were using
To
then.
make the
They've
lobes bigger.
also Yeah, exactly. And probably had piercings here, just like young people do now. And they found a lot of tattoo-alls, a lot of tattooing was going on in the ancient past as well. They found what these needles that they used to think was for pushing in leatherwork, making holes in leatherwork in effect. And that was carried on. Oh, yes, that's what they were doing. They were reanalyzed, and it was reinterpreted that no, that was actually for tattooing.
And they were probably covered in this stuff. Like they to have seen what these people looked like, it must have been incredible. Like they must have been, especially the tall ones, if they were tattooed, it must have been unbelievable. It must have been like, epic, supernatural almost.
I think so, and I think they were adopting the same patterns that people use worldwide that are Earth energies, like the spiral pattern, like concentric circles, chevron patterns. That you find that in ancient Egypt, near, far, and wide. And also, I looked into other artifacts as well. They were importing a lot of amber from Estonia and making these huge priestly breastplates that were actually quite big, of big amber like that, row after row of amber that they were wearing as well. So when it really annoys me, and I know it annoyed you when we were, I can't remember, it may have been Malta or Sardinia once, Thomas, and the ancients were always portrayed as being disheveled with scruffy hair, wearing animal skins, when that is so far removed
They
from the
were blank.
reality of these ancestors. It's ridiculous.
That was the Temple of Gozo in Malta, where they showed the statues in the interpretive center. They have the statues of the people that they found, and the women's hair is braided and they're wearing pleated skirts. And yet, in the official drawings on the wall of the people who lived at the temple, they were like Homer Simpson with a loincloth. It was ridiculous. You see that everywhere. I see that this thing is like people like you and I, right? We come into contact with the man, the orthodoxy, right? The status quo. And there's a conflict. There's two. I always say there's two kinds of conflicts. There's one where you'll meet an archaeologist or someone like that, right? And you'll say, I have a different opinion than you, and they will go, well, I don't really agree with you, right? And then you say, well, that's fair enough. That's disagreement. He sees me as a weirdo, and it's his training. But then there's the other kind, and you know what these are like. These have almost like got a vested interest in keeping these bullshit stories going, and I find they are everywhere. They are everywhere. They're more than just, and they're very high up in like, these government bureaucracies that run these places and things like this. A lot of them are connected to religions and things like that. There's, I know it sounds like a cliche, but I genuinely do believe that they're hiding a true history from us.
Absolutely. That's why I call it the secret history of Stonehenge. And I touch on numerous monuments in that. And for example, I've been writing for Stonehenge Visitor Centre for 10 years. One of my guides, guidebook, was really widely accepted there, and another book. And I did some posters for them as well. And I've been selling for 10 years. One hint of the secret history of Stonehenge, and they banned every single product from sale. So, I mean, it must be doing something right.
What? They banned all your books and maps
Yeah.
Because of this book.
Yeah, because of the secret history of Stonehenge, and which is, that's their prerogative in which to do so. But I'm just pointing out, I had been writing for them for 10 years, and I contributed to their own guidebook as well. So they know I'm a good writer. They've trusted me to write in their guidebooks, and yet when it comes to this book, no, it got an official ban. But the boots on the ground staff that take people around Stonehenge, because it's changed since you went there, Thomas. You have to have an English heritage guide now. You have to listen to them, but they do take you in. And there's a really lovely lady that I know very well, because I take people to Stonehenge a lot. And she said she'd much rather hear my version. She said, if only we could say your version of the anomalies at Stonehenge, because another anomaly about the trilithons is, and again, this was recorded in the 1500s, round about the time of Henry VIII. Okay, so it really predates Stukely now by a good couple of centuries, actually. And they said they found this really strange plaque. They called it a plaque and then a table. They said it was of a material of metal that they couldn't identify. And it was like a rectangular shape like this, and it had strange hieroglyphs on it. And they couldn't understand it. So they took it to London to a schoolmaster there called Mr. Elliot to try and interpret. He was good at Latin, that was spoken widely in churches at the time. And he was quite bilingual in other languages as well. And he couldn't identify the metal, and he couldn't identify the so-called hieroglyphs. Now, if you know Stonehenge really well, as I do, then trilithon number 57, is covered in lichen at the moment, but originally in the early photographs by Atkinson, it's in Atkinson's book, so you could look it up yourself. There is one trilithon that has a carving that matches that exact dimensions of what they were talking about. It could be that at some point in Stonehenge's history, probably, you know, later than the Bronze Age or the late Bronze Age, a plaque could have been put up, and that carving on that trilithon housed it. It's highly, it would be a big coincidence if those two were just the same size, for example. So I think there was that added to Stonehenge. Why was it hieroglyphs? Why was it in a language nobody could identify? That's quite intriguing as well. And I point out all of these strange aspects of Stonehenge. And as well, another really strange thing of Stonehenge, told to me by an archaeologist, happens to live in my hometown. And I was talking to him about Stonehenge, and he said, "Oh, you're talking about the trilithons. Did you know about trilithon number 60?" And I said, "That's the one with all the concrete in it." Because what happened was Professor Richard Atkinson, it was slightly leaning, which I would say slightly leaning to sacred space, like lots of stones do. He thought it should be made perpendicular. So he got chain and crane and forced it upright, and it cracked. And it went, and it literally let out, some say, this strange sound, and he had to plug it up with concrete. That's stone number 60. Well, the archaeologist told me, "Oh, that broke because you could sit inside of it." He said you could sit two people comfortably, three at a push. That's his quote. And he showed me some very old photographs of how you would go inside of that stone. So what was that all about? You could sit in some stones, you could have water from another. One could have housed a metal plate in some time in its history. That's what I mean. We think we know Stonehenge so well because it's the most written about stone circle in England, but we don't really know its true history.
Wow. So you've written a dangerous book. Well done. I have a theory,
Always.
everybody should have at least one inside them. So if you're not on the edge of your seat after what Maria's just been telling us about our new book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, which I can't wait to read, you can also see myself and Maria at two festivals or two events in England this year. The first one is the Shine Seminars in the south of England. It's in the kind of Bristol, Gloucester area. And that's in July. I'll put the links down to that below. Myself and Maria are on the same day. And then we're doing a special one-day thing in October at Glastonbury for the AV people, where we will both be doing a kind of a daytime spectacular of all the things we want to talk about regarding our studies over the years of these ancient mysteries and stuff like that. So you'll have a chance to see us twice in the south of England. So you've no excuse if you live down there. So I've never done the Shine seminar before. So you said I'm quite looking forward to. You've done it yourself, haven't you, Maria?
Yes, it's August the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And it should be a widely attended event run by a really nice chap called Eli. And it is a really lovely atmosphere. I would say to people that like festival, like music, like good food, and good conversations are always had there. It's very relaxed and very welcoming as well. So everybody feels welcome. There's lots of things to see and do and stalls to visit for those that like to shop, for example. And in Glastonbury, where Thomas and I will be, which will be at the Assembly Rooms, isn't it, in Glastonbury? That's again a lovely town to visit. You can stay locally at the Premier Inn, and there's lots of B&Bs in the area for those that need to travel in. And we will be meeting up with audience members as well. It's going to be very relaxed and open and have, again, good discussions. And Glastonbury's a wonderful place to explore, from the Abbey to the Chalice Well to the famous tour itself.
Yeah, I think both events are going to be epic, and I'm looking forward, Maria, as well, as to see as many of you here at these events as possible. And yeah, I'm actually on fire to do both of them, to be honest with you, the more I think about them. So I'm sure Maria is the same way. So Maria, listen, fantastic. Congratulations on the book. You've really sold it really well, but don't give away too much because people, we want people to buy. Where can people get it?
They can get it from my website, which is the Avebury, Avebury, the aveburyexperience.co.uk. I also have lots of courses at esotericcollege.com. And if you can't remember any of those, just go to my landing page, mariawheatley.uk. So there's some platforms for you. And
Well,
it's got loads more in it as well. Like I say, it's 400 pages of brand new information. So always something to discuss about with the secret history of Stonehenge.
well, that's fantastic. And Maria's websites are amazing, and her videos and everything. And I've been saying, I saw you on some TV show recently as well, on Discovery Channel. So you're all over the place. So, you know, well done. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the summer, and continue on doing the amazing work you're doing. And, you know, well done on, you know, annoying them that much to the point where they did that to you, because ultimately it just proves you did something right and you did something true. And always follow your dharma. So, Maria, thanks again very much. And everybody else, we'll see you in the summer in England. And don't forget to get Maria's book.
Thank you.